Okay, today we are looking at learning target 10A, and that is going to focus on measures of central tendency. Now, you might not be familiar with that term, measures of central tendency. However, I think you'll be familiar with what is included in that, because essentially when we say measures of central tendency, we mean mean, median, mode, and range. So in Unit 10, we're going to start looking at data and how we can analyze it and how we can use different data displays to show what's happening. Okay, so let's start by reviewing what mean is. The mean of a data set is the sum of the values divided by the number of values. Now, sometimes we refer to this as like the average of the data. So mean and average are used often interchangeably. The official math term is mean, but if you were to say I'm going to find the average of something, most people would know what you're talking about. And so again, to find the mean, we're going to add up, so find the sum of all of the numbers in the data set. We're going to divide that by however many numbers there are. So if there's 10 numbers in the data set, I would add up all 10, and then I would divide it by 10 because there were 10 numbers. Okay, so for example, if I wanted to find the mean of this data set, my first step would be to add 6, 13, 12, 18, and 14. And then because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers in the data set, I'm going to divide that by 5. Okay, and so using a calculator, when I add up those 5 numbers, I'm going to get a total of 63. And 63 divided by 5 gives me 12.6. So the mean of this data set is 12.6. Okay, so on your own here, we're going to have you find the mean of this data. So your school's doing a fundraiser to collect money to give to charity. Below are the donations made by people in your class. And so with that data, I'd like you to find the mean. Okay, and then this same data set is going to come back up as our example as we keep going. So if you're working out, your problem on a piece of paper, keep it for the next question because it's going to come up again. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is talk about median. Okay, the median of a data set is the middle value when the numbers or the values are written in numerical order. So what that means is that you can't just take the data set and start looking for the middle number right away. You have to make sure first that you put all the numbers in order from least to greatest, and then you can start working towards the middle. Okay, now if a data set has an even number of values, that means there's going to end up being 2 numbers in the middle. And so the median is going to be whatever is halfway between those two, which you can easily find by finding the mean or the average of whatever 2 numbers are in the middle. And I'll show you what that looks like in this example. So I've got, it looks like 8 numbers here in my data set, and I want to find the median. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put these in order from least to greatest. So it looks like we're going to go 6, and then 7, and then 12, 14, 20. Oh, nope, sorry. After 14, we'd have 18, and 20, 20, and 21. So it should look something like this. A good trick is to go back when you think you have them in order and just count up how many numbers there should be and double check that you got them all. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so once I'm confident that I got them all, I'm going to start working my way towards the middle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross out the one on either end. Then I'm going to cross out the next one from each end. And so on until I end up either with a single number in the middle, or in this case, I end up with 2 numbers in the middle. Now, I need to figure out what's going to be exactly halfway between 14 and 18. I'm guessing most of you know what number is halfway between 14 and 18, but let's say we had 2 numbers and we weren't totally sure. We can find the mean of these 2 by adding them up and dividing by 2. So 14 plus 18, that's 32, divided by 2 gives me 16. And again, if you were just sort of doing that in your head, halfway between 14 and 18, of course, is 16. And so that's our median. But again, this just goes to show that you can use this strategy if you aren't positive. Because like, let's say the 2 numbers in the middle were like 75 and then like 91. You might want to use that strategy to figure out what's exactly halfway. Okay, so going back to that same data we had before on the donations for the fundraiser, I'd like you to find the median of that data set. Okay, next up is mode. Mode is, mode of the data set is the value that occurs the most often. So it's the number that shows up the most, right? And so a data set can technically have no mode one mode or more than one mode. So if it has no mode, that means that there's no number that shows up more often than anything else. If it has one mode, that means there's one number that shows up the most. And if it has more than one mode, like for example, it could have two modes. So let's say there are two numbers that each showed up twice and everything else showed up once, then there would be two modes. But there could potentially be three modes and so on. So there is a variety of different types of answers you can have here, but again, we're looking for which number comes up the most often. So for example, in that same data set that I was using for median, right, if I'm looking for the mode, it's often helpful to actually have them in order from least to greatest. And so the good news is if you already put them in order from least to greatest for your median, then you can just look back at that same list to do the mode. And so when they're in order, any number that repeats will be side by side, so it makes it really easy to spot. And so in this case, I see 20 shows up twice, every other number showing up once, and so my mode would be 20. So in this case, I only have one mode. All right, so back to the donations from for charity. Take that same data set that you just worked with for mean and median. Now I'd like you to find the mode of that data set. All right, and last term is the range. So the range of a data set is the difference between the greatest value and the least value. Often we'll refer to the greatest value as the maximum and the least value as the minimum. And essentially we use range to show how spread out the data is. So if you have a small range, like let's say the range was only like 10, that means that the data is all really close in value. So there's not a lot of variance among the different data values, right? Whereas if you have a large range, so like 85 or something, that means that the data is spread out and it varies greatly. All right, so looking at our same data set that we were using for the other examples, again, it's often helpful to go back to your list that you put in order for when you're doing median, because now it's very easy to spot what our two extremes are. So the smallest number, or the minimum, is 6, and my largest value, or the maximum, is 21. And so again, you don't have to specifically put them in order to do the range. However, if you've already done it, it's nice because then it very clearly points out what your two extremes are, so your minimum and your maximum. All right, so now all I have to do is subtract the two, so 21 minus 6 gives me 15, so the range of my data is 15. All right, and so last one, go back to your work that you did for the donations to charity and find the range of that data set. All right, and so finally to wrap up, please record one thing that you learned or were reminded of and any questions that you have. Remember, you're supposed to include something for each of those prompts, and we'll see you in class tomorrow. Thanks.